Ready? Okay, good afternoon. It's a nice crowd today. It's okay. It's a miserable day outside, so we're glad you're joining us here inside. I'm Dr. Sarah Abosh Jacobson. I am the Barbara Rabin Chief Education Officer here at the museum. And we'd like to thank you for joining us for our 2023 Spring Break Survivor Speaker Series. It's okay, she's going. We'll hold on just 1 second. Babies are babies the world over. That's the way that works. Today you will hear from Miss Magie Furst, who will share her experiences growing up in Germany and her escape to England on the Kindertransport, a rescue mission that allowed almost 10,000 Jewish children from Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia to leave those countries and to live with private English citizens during what became the war. Before we begin, I would like to thank our community partners for the Spring Break Survivor Speaker Series, and there's a number of them: Congregation Shareth Israel, Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture, Green Hill School, Hope Supply Company, Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas Jewish Community Relations Council, Refugee Services of Texas, Southwest Jewish Congress, Temple Shalom, Texas Holocaust, Genocide, and Anti-Semitism Advisory Commission. We are grateful for your support of the museum and our programs. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our board members, and our volunteers in the audience, including Joel Rothman. We couldn't fulfill our mission without you. If you are interested in becoming a museum member or volunteer, please visit our website, dhhrm.org, to learn more. In just a moment, Maggie will share her story with you. Then we will have time for questions and answers. If you're joining us in person today, you can use the card that you received at check-in with the little golf pencil to write out your questions, and our staff will be around at the end of Maggie's talk to pick those up, because we will get to as many of those questions and answers as we can. If you're joining us virtually, please use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen to type out and submit your questions. Beyond that, I would ask you please to silence your phones, and that includes the adults too, because the kids get that. I appreciate that. And it is now my pleasure to welcome you to hear Magie Furst.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Magie Furst. I'm going to be talking to you about the Kindertransport, and I want to dedicate this to all the children of the world who are still languishing and who are still being abused, starving, taken away from their families, etc., etc. So this is for all the children. I'm talking to you about my experience in Germany during the Hitler era and subsequently leaving on the Kindertransport to a haven in Great Britain. Jews have lived in Germany since Roman times. In Germany, the Jewish population was well integrated by the end of the 19th century until the rise of the Nazis. Jews were part of the mainstream in Germany and were professors at universities, lawyers, doctors, writers, and scientists. Many of the department stores had Jewish owners, as well as the banks. Mixed marriages were common. In general, the Jewish community consisted of Reform Jews, although there were some Orthodox congregations. Our father, Alfred Romberg, was born in Diepholz, Germany, a small town not far from Essen. He was one of 13 children. His parents were Frederica and Julius Romberg, my paternal grandparents. Our mother, Sida Romberg, Rothschild was born to Katinka and Benjamin Rothschild in the village of Astheim, Germany, not far from Mainz. Many of you may know about Mainz from the Gutenberg Bible. My mother was one of 4 children. Our father fought in the German army in the First World War. He was heavily wounded and awarded the Iron Cross, the highest medal given at that time. And he was the first commissioned Jewish officer in the German army. When he met our mother, he was a handsome young bank officer in Essen. They fell in love and married in 1927. They lived in Astheim in our grandparents' house. He joined the family business and became co-owner upon the death of my grandfather in 1929. He took over the successful grain, feed, and general merchandise store. I was born in 1929, and my brother Bert was born in 1930. In 1933, after Hitler came to power, our dad was harassed endlessly by the stormtroopers who marched in front of our house and business day and night, shouting Nazi slogans, causing him great distress, which eventually killed him. He had a fatal heart attack in March of 1934. At that time, I was 4.5 years old, and Bert was 3.5 years old. Mama never got over our father's death. I found some old newspapers she had saved in which it describes the funeral cortege moving through the village. Stones and insults were thrown at the mourners. I started school in Astheim, and as far as I can remember, I was well treated by my fellow schoolmates. We also played behind closed doors with our neighbors' children. These same neighbors supplied us with food, milk, butter, and other essentials through which we had passed through a common basement wall into which we had made a hole. They supported us through many trials, as they had in years past. We had a teenager named Elizabeth, whom we called Leah, who took care of us while Mama and our Oma worked in the store. Mama struggled to keep the business afloat, but as the anti-Semitic Nuremberg laws were passed, the farmers no longer felt it necessary to pay their debts to Jews. She was forced to sell the business for a pittance. We moved to a little town called Eschwege in 1936, which was located near Kassel. It had a good-sized Jewish population, and we moved there for moral support. My Aunt Paula lived there with her family, my mother's sister. We tried to overcome the adverse conditions. Mama had to take in laundry and sewing to support us. She was ordered to go to Gestapo headquarters and hand over all our valuables. After 3 tries, we finally found an apartment that was Jewish-owned, which we shared with another Jewish family. We were unable to attend secular schools and had to attend the Jewish school. The trouble was we were all in one classroom, so you can imagine how much we learned. Well, what we learned was hide and seek and playing around and joking. We didn't get much instruction. After Crystal Night, which was November the 9th, 1938, there was no school, nor was there a synagogue left to attend. Everything that was Jewish-owned was burnt, destroyed, and in ruins. Houses were ransacked. Jewish men and teenagers were dragged off to newly established concentration camps. Our cousin Henry, 14 and a half, was dragged off across the town square. By December 13th, 1938, Jewish industries and shops were seized. Living conditions in Eschwege went from bad to worse. We could not go out without being beaten up by the Hitler Youth. Hitler Youth were the young people who were recruited to be groomed as Gestapo men, and they did a pretty good job. Some of the men were, when we could not go out without being beaten up by the Hitler Youth, some of the men were eventually released from the concentration camps in terrible physical conditions, and some came home in urns. Most of them tried to leave the country as soon as possible to whomever would take them in, but many had no means and no guarantor and despaired, often committing suicide. We are convinced that Mama made a decision after Kristallnacht that she could no longer risk her children's lives in Nazi Germany. Our father had a sister and her family living in Stockholm since 1928. Mama appealed to them for a visa for Bert and myself. Following Kristallnacht and appeals by Jewish committees and a debate in Parliament, the British government agreed to admit up to 10,000 children from Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. You might think that's a lot of children, but it's from 3 countries. 10,000 children. Just imagine how many children are in your child's school district alone. There may be over 10,000 in one school district, and this is from 3 countries. But it's better than nothing. A £50 bond per child was posted to guarantee their eventual fare to some other country. The British Inter-Aid Committee was established. Their goal was to rescue 50,000 children. They were mostly Jewish, but there were some non-Aryan Christian children. Parliament passed an emergency measure to permit these children to enter the United Kingdom. The conditions were they had to be potty trained, alone, under 17 years of age, and only 2 per family. That's another problem if you have 3 children, or you only have 1. What do you do? They figured it would cost a minimum of £25 per year to maintain each child. That was a lot of money at that time. The British people came forth and opened their hearts and homes. Only 9,354 were actually saved, usually rounded out to 10,000. The first transport of 196 children were from a Jewish orphanage in Berlin on December the 2nd, 1938. That was barely 1 month since Kristallnacht. The last transport left with a Dutch Christian lady. Her name was Gertrude Weissmiller. And she faced down Eichmann in Vienna and brought out 600 children on one train. My brother and I received our visas to go to Sweden 3 days before Mama got permission from London to work in the household of her cousins, the Lowenthals, who had emigrated to Great Britain in 1934. They were instrumental in getting her out and getting us onto the Kindertransport as opposed to going to Sweden. We were overjoyed that we could all be in Britain. Of course, saying goodbye to all our relatives, and my grandmother was very sad. My grandmother was 69 years old the last time I saw her. She was sent to the old age home in Frankfurt, and from there she was deported. She had always been a part of our lives, as had all our other relatives. We left with 1 small suitcase each, about the size that you could take onto Southwest Airlines. It wasn't very big. And little kids can't carry big suitcases anyway. The night before we left, I cleaned out my suitcase and I threw away all my underwear. You don't need underwear. I put my dolls in there. It was much more important. Okay? I don't think my mother was ever aware that I did that. All the clothes we wore were made by our mother and grandmother because we couldn't buy anything. So we tore up old things or curtains and made something new out of them. We had 10 marks with us. That's all the money we could take out of the country. Even in those days, there wasn't much money. Today, it's nothing. We had little else with us. The scene at the railroad station wasn't very happy, as you can imagine. Some parents held on to their children and didn't want to let them go. Others ran off without saying goodbye. Some didn't come to the station. Most of the children were not as upset as the parents were. After all, this was a big adventure. I thought I was going on a holiday to Great Britain to play in the sand and the water and the sun, and it was going to be a lot of fun. Okay, the train went forward with a lurch, and we were on our way. I can't remember too much about the train ride, except when it suddenly stopped. I heard the Gestapo boots coming into our compartment. I know I was petrified, that I remember. Looking into our suitcases, they screamed at us, "You Jewish dogs, do you have any diamonds?" Well, we would have been insane to have any contraband with us. Besides that, I doubt if there were any Jews left in Germany in 1939 who still had diamonds. Finally, we continued on and crossed the border into Holland. The minute we got across the border, we looked out the window. You could see the people waving in the fields, and it was a completely different atmosphere. The first stop we came to, there were smiling Dutch angels handing us hot chocolate and fruit that we were not allowed to have. Only tropical fruits and vegetables not grown in Germany. Jews were not allowed to have anything that wasn't grown in Germany. I had my first orange in Holland, and I got a big hug, and nobody spat in my face. The train continued on to Hoek van Holland, the port for Rotterdam. We boarded a little ship and crossed the English Channel at night. We arrived in Harwich on the East Coast early in the morning. It was a glorious, bright, sunshiny English day, May 23rd, 1939. There's nothing more beautiful than a sunshiny English day. We were directed to another train bound for Liverpool Street Station in London. Mama's cousins picked us up in a beautiful new car. As soon as we were on the way, my brother Bert threw up on the cousin's wife's new shoes. That was our introduction to Great Britain. Okay, the next shock came as the uncle announced that he was bankrupt and had sold the house. But Mama could stay and work for the new owners, who were due to arrive from Vienna next week. After a few weeks, Mama had a nervous breakdown, but she persevered and came through it. What could she do? She had no recourse. She couldn't speak English. She didn't have any money. She couldn't go back to Germany. And not only that, but Bert and I had no lodgings. So the uncle knew the president of the Coventry Synagogue. Coventry is a little town in the Midlands, in an industrial town. It's a very beautiful little town, and that's where we were sent. And between the two of them, they found homes for 55 children. Bert was eventually sent to the Shepherds, Mom and Pop, Peter their son, and Mary their daughter. They called him Bertie. Pop was the mailman, and Mom was a bus conductor at the onset of war. The Simons, where I went to live, were Jewish and better off financially than the Shepherds, but treated me very shabbily. I became a cheap maid. Bert and I lived only a few blocks apart, and we went to the same school, but we saw each other only during class breaks or at Hebrew school once a week. I had to cook and clean when I came home from school, and at 10 years old, I was not very good in the kitchen. Actually, I was a terrific cook. I was very consistent. I burnt the meat every day. To correct it, I took newspapers and put them on the floor, and then I turned the pot upside down and scraped the black off the meat and put it back in the same burned pot again. You know, if you want to get rid of the burn, you need a clean pot. Well, not knowing that using the same burned pot doesn't improve the taste. Anyway, they ate it. Either they had no taste buds or they were stupid or both. In school, I was not too happy either. My English was not too swift as yet. Luckily for me, there was a Jewish teacher, a Mrs. Jacobs, who took me under her wing. The headmistress's name was Miss Smith, and try as I might, it came out as Miss, to the delight of the other children. So I adapted to my new surroundings very quickly. And by the time the war broke out on September 3rd, 1939, I spoke no more German. I wouldn't have dared. The English hated the Bosch. That was a hangover from the French from the First World War. I was able to speak English in 3 months because I had nobody to speak German to. I looked at the wall wouldn't talk to me. The flowers wouldn't talk to me. So, and the kids didn't know what I was saying, so I had to speak English. My unhappiness with the family wasn't enhanced by the fact that I was the scapegoat for their children's misbehavior. John was 2 years older than I, and Esther was 2 years younger. John teased me incessantly. Esther and I shared one bed, which she wet every night. Well, to rectify that, I took my pillow and I wrapped myself up in my coat and I slept on the floor. English houses are ice cold, you know. Even today, they're not as warm as our homes. So don't go to Great Britain in the wintertime, okay? As the war progressed, the English needed factory workers. Mama found a factory job. Now she could support herself and rented rooms with 3 other refugee friends, but she still did not have enough money to support Bert and myself. She took in work at night and saved enough money to dream about going to the United States. What a dream. Mama showed me 2 telegrams she received from the Swiss Red Cross. She had asked about our relatives. They came back as undeliverable. I knew that she was worried, but in my childish way, I assured her the British would work hard to help everybody, and they really did. Bert and I went to visit Mama whenever we had a school break, despite the fact that the bombing had started. We were so happy when we were together. When it came time to go back to Coventry, as soon as the train started to move, Bert started to cry, and I, the brave one, started to cry with him all the way back. Coventry was the favorite target of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. They were aiming for the Triumph Motor Works and the Jaguar plant, which had converted to war weapons. But instead, they destroyed the beautiful center of the city, including the centuries-old cathedral. Then they came back a week later and finished it off. That was November the 14th, 1940. There were many casualties. The destruction was devastating. All communication in and out of the city were cut, but the British kept a stiff upper lip. The Simons house was damaged the first time around, and we had evacuated to a small village near Banbury in the vicinity of Oxford. Finally, the Red Cross was able to connect us to each other, our mother in London and Bert in the damaged house in Coventry. The conditions we were living under only made my distaste for Mr. Simon more pronounced. He was an abuser, and I was petrified, but had no escape. My writing paper, my only means of communication with my mother, and my stamps had mysteriously disappeared. I had to wait until we went to London again. Then I did not go back to the Simons. Mama went to the Bloomsbury House, which was an affiliation of HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, who were there to help the refugees. And today they help all refugees, no matter where they are or who they are. Between the two of them, they found me a wonderful boarding school, which had been evacuated to Hertfordshire, near Cambridge, from London. I finally started to blossom and live like a human being. The school was situated on an estate belonging to a British colonel fighting in North Africa, who had loaned the estate to the London County Council for the duration of the war. The teachers were like mothers to us. We were 36 girls. 2 of us were Jewish, and 2 of us were from the Spanish Civil War. I was well treated, and I didn't mind doing my share to keep the house and grounds in good shape. I took care of Alma the goat. Alma and I had a good relationship. We talked to each other. Although she smelled like a goat, I didn't care. I was happy. Now you all go home and get rid of your dogs and get yourself a goat. They're wonderful. You won't have to mow your lawn anymore. Wonderful animals. And the dog doesn't mow the lawn, the goat will. You don't have to go take the goat every week to the vet. The goat will give you the most wonderful milk and cheese you've ever had. You go to Tom Thumb or any of the stores, you pay through the nose to get a good piece of cheese or something, right? Goat's milk. Best of all, you won't have to pick up after the goat. The droppings are good for the garden, so you got it all around. Okay, in the meantime, Bert was sent to a warm and loving family in Hartford, not far from where I was. Mama was afraid he might be converted, and it was time for his bar mitzvah. He went to live with the Pettit family. They were extraordinary people. Mrs. Pettit slept on the floor when our mother came to visit to get some respite from the bombing. I was only able to stay in school until I was 14 and a half years old. The school was not equipped to teach beyond that age. Unless you had a scholarship or money, you went to work. There was a war to be won, and school was not the English priority at this time. I returned to London and went to work for a dentist. The first day on the job, I cleaned up glass from a bomb which had fallen on the field across from the office. Every night when the sirens went off, we went to the air raid shelter, except me. Well, I thought I was indomitable. Nothing would touch me. Nothing was going to hurt me. One night, the ceiling and the windows flew in, and I came very close to being cut very badly. After that, I was the first one in the shelter every night. On June the 5th, 1944, it was D-Day, and the invasion of Europe began under General Dwight Eisenhower. We knew something was going on. The planes were flying south, loads and loads of planes. The day before were all going south, and they had to be going somewhere. Mama had started to inquire if we could go to the United States. Eventually, we did get our visas, even though the war was still on. It was a hard decision for Mama to make because of Bert's education. Bert had won a scholarship to take him through Cambridge, through his PhD, room and board, and everything paid for. But she decided we would all have a better chance in the US. We left Britain with heavy hearts, the beginning of April 1945, on the old Aquitania, which had been converted to a Canadian hospital ship. We sailed from Greenock, Scotland, to Halifax, Nova Scotia. From there, we traveled by train to Montreal, St. Albans, Vermont, to New York City. It was April the 12th, 1945, a day before President Roosevelt died. The war was in its final stages in Europe. Mama's sister and brother and their families welcomed us very warmly. The British were wonderful to us. We shall always be indebted to them for their indomitable spirit, their kindness, and compassion. They saved our lives and those of many others. No other country in the world would take in Jewish refugees. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the world, the same as it is today, all over again. A few countries made it a little bit easier, such as Chile, Costa Rica, and the Belgian Congo. Even in this country, it was hard to get in. President Roosevelt had some members in his cabinet who didn't want Jews. There was no place for them to go when the Holocaust started. The greatest tragedy that ever befell the Jewish people. Some of the children that arrived on the Kindertransport were picked up by various agencies and placed in hostels. The younger ones went to families. Some of the older ones were taken in as household help or nannies. Others were placed with loving families all over the British Isles. They went to England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Some adjusted very well. Others had a hard time being torn away from their families. The younger ones forgot their parents very quickly. Some were converted to Christianity or were adopted by families who grew to love them as much or more than their own children. As they became older, some joined the armed forces and fought valiantly. Some fell in battle. Some joined the Jewish Brigade. After the war, a few were reunited with their families or siblings, but most of the uniting was very strained and difficult. The children had not seen their parents for at least 6 years. The parents had unspeakable horrors to deal with. Many had psychological or mental problems and could never get used to each other again. The children had also acquired a different culture and way of life. Most of the children never saw their dear ones again. All those we left behind perished. In the summer of 1989, which is now, my goodness, 35 years or more, there was a 50-year reunion in London, which we attended. We were addressed by many dignitaries. Amongst them was Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister. Of course, there were the countless ordinary people who gave us love and shelter. The Kindertransport is but a small part of Holocaust history, but an important one. We were the ones to whom nothing happened at all. But something did happen. We were spared the horrors of the death camps. We were uprooted, transported to a different culture, and faced not the horror of the camps, but a very human mixture of kindness, indifference, occasional exploitation, and the selflessness of ordinary people faced with needy children. Many British values have stayed with us. Fair play comes to mind, and that's not cricket. We need to defend the helpless and stand our ground, and don't give in to bullies. Be kind to all people. Be sure to help for the youngsters, for your parents and your grandparents. And do some volunteer work, and whenever you can, save your money and give some to the Red Cross and the American Heart Association. You can go to the food bank and help make sandwiches. There are many homeless in our community. Unfortunately, most of all the work as hard as you can in school, all your children. If you don't get it the first time, you try again and again until you get it. Read as much as you can. It's very important that you do well in school. I can't emphasize that enough. Become active and don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be a shrinking vine. I had to go back to school when I came to New York. And I went to Jamaica High School. And then I went to Queens College at night. I had to work in the daytime because we had no money. In 1948, I met my husband at the beach in Far Rockaway, and we were married in 1949. Our children were born in New York, and we came to Dallas in 1963, excuse me. My husband was also a refugee child, but he came to this country in 1937 with his parents, and he went to the New York City schools, and then he was drafted into the Army in 1943. First he was a dishwasher, then he was a medic, and then he became a translator for General Patton, and he went into Germany. And you can imagine what he wanted to kill all the Germans, but, you can't do those things anymore. And I have 2 wonderful grandchildren. And now I have a wonderful granddaughter-in-law, and I have a great-granddaughter, too. And I've been volunteering for the museum for as long as it's been in existence. And I want to dedicate this to all the children of the world. And let me tell you, we have a terrible, terrible report in Dallas County. In yesterday morning's paper, they have on the front page, scathing report critical to county juvenile system. How many children are languishing in the courts because there's nobody paying attention to them. It's just terrible, terrible. They're thrown away like garbage. They're human beings. It's awful. So I'm doing this for all the children of the world. There's still a lot going on, a lot of abuse. The children are caught in the wars. The children are taken away from their parents. The parents never see the children again. What's happening in Ukraine? The starving in Africa. We just have to do something. We have to do more. Well, if we're doing something, do more. My parents always said you have to give until you bleed. And I believe that with my whole heart. Okay, can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Maggie. So we have some questions from the audience, and our staff will be going through. So if you have a card, hold it up to give out, and they will come to you and get it. Okay. So Maggie, the first question is: did you ever go back to visit Germany?
Yes, I did.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I went to Germany to visit on the condition that I go to Israel first. And my husband agreed to that. And when I put my foot down on the ground in Frankfurt, after coming from Tel Aviv, I was shaking until I got used to the idea of being there again. And when I walked in the street, I had this feeling in my head, well, if people that were my age or older, what did you do? You know, and it took me a while to get over that feeling.
Have you been back since then, or you just went the one time?
I've been back twice.
Okay, all right. The next question is: did you share your story with your children when they were younger, or did you wait until they were quite a bit older?
My children didn't want to have anything to do with anything that had German attached to it after, because we lost so many of our relatives. So it took a while before they got used to the idea that we were the victims, not the oppressors.
Okay. Maggie, do you have any happy memories from when you were in England?
In England?
Yeah.
Many.
Would you share one or two?
Oh, my goodness. First of all, the country is beautiful. It is beautiful. I mean, the green is green, the flowers are beautiful, the people were good. I had I made many friends. The architecture is wonderful. They don't knock their buildings down if they're 50 years old. There's a lot of history. It's just, it's lovely.
Maggie, did you ever recover any of the belongings you and your brother and mother were first forced to turn over to the Nazis?
No.
Did you?
No, something strange happened, very creepy. We went to Astheim. Our babysitter invited us, and the village invited us, and Harry and I went to visit. And I saw my doll's house in my friend's house. She still had it because I gave it to them when we left. And Bert said to me, "Why didn't you take it?" And I said, "How can I do that? I gave it to them. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore."
Okay.
But yeah. It's a funny feeling when you see that.
Yeah. Okay. This is a very interesting question. Somebody would like to know if you have ever felt survivor's guilt because you were one of the 10,000 children that were able to get out. That's a tough question.
Guilt?
Guilt, yeah.
Yes, I
Why?
did. Why? Mm-hmm. I don't know why. How do you know what comes from the heart?
Yeah, okay.
I went, for instance, Max. Most of you probably know Max or know about Max.
She means Max Glauben, who was a Holocaust survivor and a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto who passed away.
He went through hell.
Yeah.
And I did not.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we had hardships, yes. But everybody has hardships. But Max went through the concentration camps, and he lost most of his family. And when I first met him, I felt like a dwarf next to him. I don't know. I just can't
Yeah.
can't describe it.
I understand.
Therefore the.
But that's you. That's not Max, because he
No,
never
that was me.
made anybody
No,
feel guilty.
He was always very warm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Why did you move to Dallas?
Well, that's a good question. We lived in New York for 16 years, and it was hectic in New York. We had 2 small children, and it was very busy. And my brother was already here in Dallas, and we saw what kind of a life they were leading. And our business, they built the Long Island Expressway through one of our businesses, which practically closed the business down. And so we had to do something. And it was moving. One of my husband's friends offered him a job either in the Midwest in Chicago or in the Southwest. And I didn't want to shovel snow anymore, so we came to Dallas.
Good choice.
Good choice.
Maggie, do you still speak German, and do you still understand German?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any reason to use it at any point?
Yes, I have a cousin in Germany, one of my father's brothers, who went through a concentration camp, and he survived. He married his secretary, who wasn't Jewish, and so they have 4 girls who are not Jewish, and they live in Germany, and I speak to them in German, long conversations, and occasionally I come across somebody in my daily life who wants to speak German.
Okay. Maggie, this is a question from our online audience. This is from your cousin Debbie, and she wants to know, when did you find out what happened to our family members in Germany?
Well, we never really found out everything. Some of them we still don't know. We know they perished, but we don't know how or where or when. Just from the records at Yad Vashem or in Washington at the Holocaust Museum. I know, I'm sure Debbie is interested in our grandmother. I know she was in Theresienstadt, and from there she was sent to Auschwitz. When she died, I don't know. But I'm sure it wasn't long after that.
Okay.
And then my mother's sister, too, Paula, and her daughter, Margot. I have no idea what happened to them.
Okay. This next question, which builds on what you were just saying, says, how can we love and respect each other better?
Well, we have to be tolerant, and every human being is made in the image of God. So you have to respect that.
One final question, and then what we will do is we will invite anybody from the audience who would like to come up on the ramp, and they can meet you, take a photo with you. And the final question is, what is the thing most that you want the young people who are here today to learn from your story?
I want you to be aware of what's going on in the world. I want you to work hard in school. I want you to volunteer as much as you can and give of yourself, and always respect your parents and all your relatives. And be fair to everyone.
It's a nice message. And she says to respect your relatives because Maggie, as she was sharing with you, didn't have a lot of relatives after all of this. A lot of survivors didn't. Okay, help me thank Maggie for having spoken to us today. Thank you. You're welcome to join us again tomorrow when our last survivor speaker of this series will be speaking, Ralph Hockley, who will be speaking about his experiences in Germany, France, the United States, and then as an American soldier during World War II who got sent back into Europe. And for those of you who are interested, please form a line over here, and Maggie would be happy to meet you and say hello. Thank you so much.